I actually like to tell the women in the Healing Rosie community that there's only one reason that you get sick. It's stress. And that could be internal stress or external stress. But that's it. That's the reason that all of our bodies get sick. So talk to us about stress.
I love it that you just said that, because I agree. That's the true root cause of chronic illness, really. When you really break it down, it always goes back to stress of some kind and trauma, obviously, which we will talk about a little bit more. But I do want to make this link between stress and sleep dysfunction, because obviously not all sleep dysfunction is due to stress, but most people who are under considerable stress, more often than not, will have sleeping difficulties. And that was your experience, as you described. That was certainly my experience, because when I had all those chronic health issues, and what led to those chronic health issues was a lot of early trauma, a lot of issues around my identity, and various things like that. I had a lot of fear, I had a lot of anxieties, and so when I ended up being physically quite compromised. And at that time, I didn't sleep well at all, which then contributed further to obviously me being sick. And essentially that was stopping me from healing as well. And what may interest people is that I do work a lot with emotional challenges, with people with a lot of emotional layers, a lot of emotional trauma, anxieties, fears, and so on. And I would say that over 90% of my clients have a level of sleep dysfunction. And when we do the emotional work, what's also interesting is that the sleep issues often correct themselves without people specifically focusing on the sleep issues. We're just doing the emotional work, right? And most of the time, we get the complete resolution. So this connection between stress and sleep, really, well, we know the stress can cause difficulties to fall asleep, to stay asleep. And of course, it can affect the quality of our sleep. And it causes this hyperarousal. So it puts us obviously in fight or flight, and that's really not conducive to sleeping, right? So we can very easily upset the balance between the sleep and wakefulness by having chronic stress issues. And obviously, we will explain why I talk about emotional toxicity rather than just chronic stress in a moment. But why is that? I mean, people may be aware that we've got different brainwave oscillation patterns. So we've got those different brainwaves at which our brain operates. So we've got delta, theta, alpha, beta, and gamma. And it's not that we in one or the other, but in certain states, you're going to always have one that dominates, right? So delta waves, and that may be something that people have heard of, is associated, obviously, the delta waves are associated with deep sleep. This is the lowest brainwave activity that we have. And that's the dreamless sleep we're talking about. This is when we heal. And this is very low. This is 0.5 to 2 hertz. So that's the lowest brainwave activity. And then we've got our theta state. And in the theta state, really, that's a slightly higher brainwave activity, but we still this is still associated with sleep. It's associated with REM sleep, with dreaming, and also with deeper meditation states. And then we go in higher up to alpha waves, which go from between 8 to 14 hertz, and that's connected with a state of relaxation, focus, but in a sort of awake state, and production of serotonin, and so on. Then we've got beta. Beta is again slightly higher up, from 14 to about 38 hertz. And that's associated with concentration, arousal, alertness. When we learn, we usually in beta. And then gamma is really the highest brainwave activity that we have, and that's heightened activity. This is also, interestingly, when we go through extreme stress or trauma, and when trauma gets encoded in the brain, we're usually talking about gamma wave activity, right? So why am I saying this? It's because what's happening these days with a lot of people is that because of perhaps, well, all sorts of different factors, but also a little bit the choices that we make in our everyday lives sort of contribute to the fact that we've disrupted a lot of the normal patterns that we should have. So what should happen normally is that we've got this alpha wave state as the main brainwave pattern, and that's the wakeful state when we are relaxed, right? And so normally what should happen, we should oscillate between delta, theta, and alpha, and then back to theta and delta when we sleep. So when we're waking up, we sort of going from delta to theta to alpha. And then through the day, maybe we're learning something new, so we can go higher up. Maybe we have a stressful event because there's some traffic on the road, and then we briefly go to sort of higher up, and then we come down again. And then as we go to bed, then we going from sort of alpha to then theta to delta again to fall into that deep sleep, which we need for healing, right? And what actually happens these days is a little bit different, because most people don't really wake up on their own. We've got a lot of issues with circadian rhythm disruption. Obviously, that's got a huge impact on our sleep, on our hormonal health, and everything else in between. But what tends to happen is that people sort of wake up not on their own because it's daylight and it's time to wake up, but rather because the alarm goes off. So we are now we jump up because the alarm's just gone off, and that straight away induces the stress state. And then, of course, many people will not just get on with their day without a cup of coffee, or maybe a few cups of coffee. And so straight away, we putting ourselves in beta wave, so we slightly stressed already at that point. We're putting more cortisol into the system, more stress hormones into the system. That increases blood sugar and blood pressure, and then the whole day kind of can get a little bit like that. And we're riding this wave of stress and deadlines and work and school runs and all the rest of it. And so then the bedtime comes, and we can be a little bit still sort of wired, and rather than be able to go through this natural oscillation all the way to delta, that kind of doesn't happen. And that disruption will be one of the reasons why people will not be sleeping particularly well. So that's really the connection. And then, of course, there could be all sorts of things that actually contribute to this disruption, right? And if we put a lot of stress hormone in the system sort of throughout the day, because that's what a lot of people do. People live up here, and this fight or flight is constant for some people. That's the issue. So we live in this sympathetic state, with this sympathetic dominance state, and that certainly will have a knock-on effect. So that's really the connection. That's the reason why we need to be paying more attention, not just to the fact that we are stressed, but uncovering a little bit what is behind the fact that we are chronically anxious, chronically fearful, chronically feeling guilty or ashamed or whatever else it may be, not feeling good enough. All of those things equal chronic stress, and that equals a lot of the time some sort of disruption in the sleep pattern, even if it's just disrupting the quality